Stop wasting time scrolling through endless clickbait, social media, and emails trying to keep up with the news. Instead, listen to all the news you need in just 10 minutes.
Welcome to The Newsworthy.
The Newsworthy podcast makes it faster, easier, and more enjoyable to get unbiased news on the go.
It helps us navigate the news without feeling overwhelmed.
Even when my time is limited.
So much detail and information in 10 minutes.
Listen now by searching The Newsworthy in your podcast app or go to thenewsworthy.com.
Hi, and welcome to the Moms and Murder Podcast, a true crime podcast featuring myself, Melissa, and with me as always is Mandy. Hi, Mandy.
Hi, Melissa.
How are you doing?
I have a cold.
Yeah, so Mandy's a little under the weather, but we are going to persevere and push through, and because it's not me, we'll keep going and won't quit.
Yeah, your voice is still as buttery as always.
Buttery is what you always want to hear. So tonight we were going to talk to you about the case of Rebecca Zahau. She is an interesting case, as all of ours are, and this comes to us from a friend on the old Twitter who suggested this case, our friend Megan over there, and this is one that you've probably heard a little bit about. I'm somewhat familiar with this case before we really looked into it and thought it was strange and weird, but once you deep dive into this, it's a whole lot of crazy. A whole lot. So I'll give you a small little bit of bio on Rebecca and then pass it over to Mandy. So Rebecca was born on March 15th, 1979 in Phalam, Burma. She grew up with three sisters, her mom and dad, and they relocated to the U.S. I'm not sure of exactly when that happened. And then Mandy will continue.
So she moved to the U.S. and I believe she was married prior to the relationship she was in when she passed away. And then they got divorced. Actually, I believe she started dating Mr. Jonah Shacknai before she was actually officially divorced.
Yeah.
So at the time of her death, she was 32 years old, living with Jonah Shacknai, who was a pharmaceutical CEO for a company, Medicis pharmaceutical company. And they lived together at his beach house in Coronado, California, along with Jonah's 6-year-old son, Max, from a previous marriage. Jonah Shacknai at the time was 54 years old and had 2 divorces under his belt with 3 children between those 2 marriages. His first marriage ended in a 3-year custody battle over their 2 children. Right. And then Max was born to Jonah's second wife, Dina. And there was some things I read online that suggested that their marriage was actually full of not so good stuff, like some domestic violence on both sides, and kind of just seemed like not a great relationship. Yeah. So 2 days prior to Rebecca's death, she was at home at the mansion with her 13-year-old sister, Zena. And Zena was actually visiting, had just gotten into town like the day prior from Missouri. And Max Shacknai was home as well.
And that's the 6-year-old son of Jonah.
Correct. And so somehow Max managed to fall over a second-floor banister in the mansion, which, by the way, guys, this is like a huge mansion. I saw pictures of it, and I think I read some outrageous number of bedrooms. I don't even want to say what it was now, but it was something like 16.
It's basically insulting to everyone else how many.
Right.
So whenever you say second floor, it's like second floor Real Housewives of Orange County.
Right.
Glamour, chandeliers everywhere. Insane house.
Right. The kind of place I probably would go and just not want to sit down or touch anything because I would just be way too uncomfortable because it's too high class for me.
The kind of place I wouldn't be allowed to go into. So good for you.
They would just stop you at the door.
You're obviously not part of this.
So, as I said, unfortunately, Max somehow went over the banister of that second floor and suffered spinal cord injuries as well as injuries to his head and facial bones. And he did not immediately pass away, but he did have some problems with his heart rate and his breathing, and was taken to the hospital, by paramedics after 911 was called.
So we went from 0 deaths last week
Right.
to 2 deaths this week.
Correct.
Double dose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And this, even though this podcast is really about Rebecca Zahau, this information about Max, you'll see that it's
Super
relevant
important.
and very important to this story. And we could probably do a whole nother podcast just on Max Shacknai from the information I was looking at, and still have a lot of material there. So maybe in the future sometime we'll have to delve a little bit more into Max. Yes. So Rebecca said that she was in the bathroom at the time that this accident occurred, and she heard a loud crashing noise and, of course, came out and found Max laying on the bottom floor with his Razor scooter and a bunch of pieces of chandelier that were broken all around him. And like I said, she called up for her sister Zena to dial 911, which she did around, I think they said it was around 10:10 in the morning. And the paramedics arrived just a couple of minutes later, and Max was unresponsive and taken to a children's hospital. So unfortunately, Max did die on July 16th, 2011, and it was due to brain damage caused by oxygen deprivation. And his death was ruled an accident, but there was a trauma doctor who examined him before he died that said that he thought Max actually may have suffocated before his fall. Right. So that's kind of where, things do get a little bit questionable with Max's death, but the official cause of death, it was ruled an accident. Yeah.
And there's lots of theories on what exactly happened to him because, first of all, typically you don't ride a Razor in a house, but
Who doesn't?
Yeah, I know.
My kids ride scooters and trikes and all kinds of stuff inside.
The idea is not to do that. So it was a little, I read stuff that it could have been a staged sort of situation. But then if you read further, they'll talk about there being I think paint peeling on part of the Razor from the banister.
It was on the wheel of the Razor, which of course is an odd part of the Razor to be on the banister.
Airlifted.
Right.
Yeah. So it was if you watch the recreations of the accident, I think the the sheriff's department put that together. The way that they think it happened as an accident is really 1 in a billion chances. But to me, I don't know, it makes more sense than something sinister with this poor little 6-year-old. I don't know. I'm not buying any of those kind of theories at this point.
I agree. Like I said, there would be a whole entire show we could do just on his death.
Well, there wasn't as much, I think, the controversy. It seems like a really accidental thing that happened. Controversy around it, but it still feels like what happens next gets a lot what on earth has happened? What's going on in this house is what you want to know.
Right. So the following day, which is July 12th, Rebecca takes her sister back to the airport and is going to send her back on a plane to go back home. She was supposed to be in town for 2 weeks, but of course, in light of this terrible accident with, her boyfriend's son is critically injured in the hospital, she just probably thought it was better to go ahead and send her sister back home so that she could be with, Max and the family and, just do what she needed to do in that situation. So she took the sister to the airport, and then while she was there, she picked up Jonah Shacknai's brother, Adam. Ugh. And he came into town from Memphis, Tennessee, and allegedly he had come to help his brother in the wake of Max's accident.
Right.
So, I mean...
Can we talk about his line of work? Because I didn't know this was even a thing, to be honest. My son would love to do this one day. But he was is a tugboat captain.
A tugboat captain.
That is a very specific type of captain. That just seems like what a little kid would write down on their first day of school. I want to be a tugboat captain. And he lived his dreams. Still a piece of crap man, but he lived his dreams. So at this point, Rebecca's picked up Adam. She's gone to the hospital. I don't know if they ever actually said that she went to visit him at the hospital.
I don't think she did.
Yeah. Understandable, I guess, because there are a lot of questions surfacing about what happened.
And she's just the girlfriend, too.
Yeah.
So I'm sure Max's mother would really not be thrilled to have her showing up at the hospital.
Were you watching my son when he died and now you're in the hospital? Get out.
Right.
Totally agree. So Rebecca, John, and Adam ate dinner at McDonald's. And then, which no hate on McDonald's. Love McDonald's. Mandy got us some McDonald's on her way here tonight.
I did.
We're living the dream. And so then Rebecca and Adam, Adam's the brother, they returned to the beach house. There were reports that night later from the neighbors that there was loud music playing, and even that there was a scream for help, I read. The loud music doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you're grieving and going through this.
Like, who was having a party that
it's
night?
not a party. And you'd think that, especially if you're under any kind of suspicion or there's questions about what's going on, you're going to be low key, laying low, answering cops' questions, whatever. So yeah, there's lots of loud music. And then again, somebody said they heard a female screaming. During that time, Jonah is at the hospital, supposedly at his son's bedside. His ex-wife, Dina Romano, is there as well. So Jonah actually leaves the hospital at some point and goes to take a break at the Ronald McDonald house near the hospital.
I have questions about that too.
I have questions about everything.
I do too. But so this is a man who I actually had read. Of course, he's a multimillionaire. He's a CEO of this Medici's pharmaceutical company. And I was just curious about what his income was, around that time. And I really couldn't find anything solid except for there was one thing I found that said that in 1998, with his previous wife, he had filed a tax return that showed his income to be almost $17 million.
So to be fair, that was mine last year as well.
Right.
In my dreams.
Very
that
typical.
I have every night.
So this is a man, of course, who has a lot of money. So I understand that the Ronald McDonald House is a service to families in need like that.
But if
Jonah
they're all
Shacknai
driving
was
around,
not in need. He could definitely, and you would think that a man of his, stature would just want to get like a hotel room or something.
Yeah.
So the whole thing about him
that is weird,
leaving to go to the Ronald McDonald House and all that. I don't know. It seems not weird if you just at face value take it, but then the details of this case go on, and then you're kind of like, well, that is kind of weird that he would do that instead of either going home or getting a nice hotel room nearby the hospital where he would have his own private space and, have his own, be able to do his own thing.
Well, to be honest, you'd also think that there would be a chance, no hate on anybody, but if you didn't have anything else going on, that you would stay at your child's bedside. You're getting this terrible news. I understand you need a break, but if this is day one, this isn't a 3 month down the road, you need a break. So, but I don't know. His ex-wife was there and she was a little loony as we thought, so maybe he just couldn't take it anymore. So take that as however you want.
So that was that for the night of July 12th. Everybody is now accounted for. Rebecca and Jonah's brother are at the mansion doing who knows what. And
there's a guest house that he's actually staying in because, of course, there's a guest house.
Of course there is. I would be surprised if there was only one guest house. So now we're up to the next day, which is July 13th. At 6:48 a.m., Adam Shacknai calls 911 to report that he had found Rebecca Zahau hanging from a balcony. It was one of the bedrooms that had a balcony attached in the mansion. And she was naked with her hands and feet bound with a red rope and very elaborate ties around both her wrists and ankles. And she had a long sleeve blue T-shirt tied around her head and stuffed into her mouth as if she was gagged or whatever you want to call it. There was also some tape residue found on her legs that was never really further investigated, as we'll talk about here in a little bit. So after he called 911, he apparently cut down the body. This is what he says. He cut her down before paramedics or anybody arrived. So keep that in mind going forward as we continue talking about this, that anytime you look up this story, it tells you that Rebecca Zahau was found hanging. Yeah. Well, really, we don't know if she was found hanging. That's just what Adam Shacknai, the only person present, said was the case. And but when the paramedics and police arrived, she was already on the ground. Had supposedly been cut down already at that point.
At this point, you should be putting on your tinfoil hats with us
Yes.
because we're going to go real deep here.
Yeah, there's plenty of room for going down a really deep rabbit hole with this one, and I did for sure. I spent many hours just reading all over the internet and just trying to make sense of all of this. And it's always crazy when a lot of theories make sense.
Yeah. I know.
So the paramedics arrived and attempted to revive her, but she was pronounced dead there at the scene. Investigators, when they were going through to collect evidence and searching through the house and in the room where she had supposedly jumped to her death, they found a very strange note painted in black paint on the door leading to that bedroom. And the note read, "She saved him. Can you save her?"
What?
That makes zero sense.
What do you even gather from that?
It makes no sense. And Rebecca's family members said that was not her handwriting. So,
in fairness, if I painted something, it's not my regular handwriting. You're painting with a brush. So that argument from them didn't make a lot of sense. But it made more sense to say, that's the craziest thing I've ever read. She wouldn't have written that. Also, she didn't save him, so what's happening here?
Right. And like, why is it written in the third person? Like, why would she write it, in the third person? Or even, even if it was a murder, that still doesn't really make, I don't know. It doesn't really make a ton of sense.
Typically when there's a suicide, though, and somebody's feeling remorse or something, they're going to leave something that says either, "I'm so sorry, I'm sorry I couldn't save them," or "please forgive me," or something, but not this like random.
It's like a riddle that you're leaving behind.
Oh my goodness. We don't need this on top of this case. You don't need a riddle in the middle of it. So did you happen to listen to the 911 calls from Adam?
I listened to the one that he called that morning. And I could barely get past all the heavy breathing, first of all.
He is not a man. Well, that's a big house. Honestly, it could have been a little rough to get around.
But where was he going?
Yeah, that's not clear. But he
didn't know the address.
He did not know the address, which, okay, whatever. But he didn't know her name. He never said Rebecca. He said her. There's a woman hanging from the balcony. Really, buddy? I'm sure the conversation is, how did this happen on Rebecca's watch? What was going on with Rebecca? You couldn't figure out her name. In a 5-minute call, he had to have said she or her 10 times, but never had a personal touch with it. By just saying her name, it makes it more, I don't know,
personal,
less sketchy to me, really, that you care about this person. He was like, the 911 operator was irritated that he did not know the address. She was not having that today. And he was irritated that he didn't know the address. It was a lot of drama right in that call.
It really was. And then there was we follow like several of the podcast groups on Facebook and try to interact on there, not just with fellow podcasters, but also with listeners. And I saw either yesterday or it was sometime earlier this week, but there was a post. Somebody had asked, like, don't you get so annoyed sometimes listening to the 911 calls? Because, the operators have to try and stay level-headed and calm and get the information that they need. But sometimes it does come across like they're being very like non-urgent about getting the information. And that was one of the things in this case with the call. She was like, "Well, I can't help you until you tell me the address."
She was holding her candy and her kid wasn't doing his homework or something. You're like, what? My mom was a 911 operator a little bit when I was younger, and that just seemed like the most stressful job in the world. You have to know so much and you're transferring information and all of that. But whenever you're telling somebody's hanging from a balcony, like, how do we not have GPS to figure out where that call's from and coming from?
How can you not figure it out like immediately? I know, I agree. And
why can't he say, "My brother's really rich. Can you just Google this, please? Will somebody Google where we live?" Right.
Well, I've actually had to call 911 recently, not because of any like real emergency, but there was a vehicle on fire in front of my house. But
it happens. We're in Florida.
Yeah, it was a little scary. But when I called, they actually gave me kind of the runaround. They answered and didn't even. The first thing they asked, like, "Oh, do you need fire, medical, or police?" And I said, "I need fire." And she's like, "Okay, let me transfer your call." And I'm like, "What? Don't you have
I know.
Can't you get the fire truck on the way on your own?"
Could you just start this and then come back to it? I called one time about some homeless men I saw fighting under a bridge. Well, I'm terrible with directions. So as they're like, I was so upset about it and I felt terrible because they were just beating the bag out of each other. And the 911 operator asked where it was. And I was like, "Oh, it's under such and such bridge." Well, it actually wasn't. It was under a bridge like 5 miles in the other direction. So if there's an emergency, you do not want me on the scene. I will not be able to help you.
Not if we're counting on you to give directions.
No, if there's a 7-Eleven nearby or a Chick-fil-A, I can tell you all those kind of things. But don't try and tell me roads, north, south, east, west. I don't think so.
Hey guys, as you know, I'm someone who loves knowing a little about everything. I love the news, I love entertainment, I love it all. But sometimes I don't have enough time to get all the information, all the little details and the minutia of everyday news because my goodness, it's constantly going. But thanks to the Newsworthy podcast, I can get all I need in little bite-sized pieces. So if the stress of the news is getting you down, but you still want to know what's going on in things like the election, check out the Newsworthy. And in these 10-minute episodes, they're just on the go listening. I can listen to it quickly on a walk, on my way bringing my kids to or from school or one of their activities. When I'm in line at the grocery store, there's never a wrong time to listen to the Newsworthy. But if you feel bogged down by the news and kind of the negativity of it, but you still want to be informed on what's going on, the Newsworthy is the place to do it. Erica at the Newsworthy is an independent journalist, and her team does really all the hard work and research for you. I love that the episodes are so well-rounded, and there will be fun stuff like tech or big stories, but the way Erica gives this, efficient and neutral overview of the news, and in just 10 minutes each weekday, it's perfect. Just search The Newsworthy in your podcast app or go to thenewsworthy.com to start listening. Again, search for the podcast The Newsworthy, 2 words, The Newsworthy, to make staying informed easier and more enjoyable every weekday. It's been a while since I've had a baby of my own, and some days I miss it so much. The baby cuddles and baby smiles, but when it comes to diaper rashes, not so much. I remember the first time my oldest had a diaper rash, I was really devastated. Here's this tiny thing totally dependent on me, and now she's fussy and obviously uncomfortable, and I'm supposed to have the answers. Well, with time and treatment, it went away, but what I really wanted was to avoid it altogether. And now, baby butts rejoice. New Huggies Skin Essentials are here, a brand new dermatologist-approved line of diapers, wipes, and pull-ups training pants, all designed with baby's sensitive skin in mind.
The wipes are thick and have 0 harsh ingredients for a great, gentle clean. Pull-Up Skin Essentials has got your big kid covered too, with a training pant that's ultra soft and breathable to help protect sensitive skin throughout potty training. Whether you're a first-time parent or a seasoned pro, make it easy on yourself and your baby with Huggies. Learn more at Huggies.com. Once again, head to Huggies.com to learn more.
So the police had forensics and toxicology testing done on Rebecca's body, of course, as part of her autopsy.
Right.
But on September 2nd, that same year, her death was formally announced as a suicide. So even with all these weird circumstances, they're saying that she definitely committed suicide. So what they're alleging here is that she tied herself up, stuffed her own mouth with a T-shirt and tied it around her head, and somehow with her hands tied behind her back in these intricate knots managed to hop her way over, you know, to rig up this whole thing. Like there was allegedly the rope was tied around a bed.
Mandy
that was
used
in
air
the
quotes
room.
for that.
I did. And I like rolled my eyes too. Allegedly. She had supposedly tied this rope around this bed and this elaborate like thing and then hopped her way over to the balcony and I guess flung herself off head first also from what they say.
Yeah.
That she just dove
Thought
off
she
the
was
balcony.
bungee jumping? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Well, here's how I know this wasn't a suicide. They found her naked. If you are a woman and you're going to kill yourself, I do not want to be found like that. I'm going to have on like winter clothes, as many layers as possible, and then maybe like glamour shots right before so I look really good for my casket. But you will not find me naked. If you find me naked, something has gone wrong.
Right.
Everything has gone wrong.
And I apologize for not knowing the exact sort. We read so many things on these cases.
This was a rabbit
hole. And it
hole.
all gets just mixed up in your brain. But on something I read, I'm not sure if it's 125% credible, but
it's not.
Someone had said that Rebecca actually had some body issues that she had suffered with before. Mm-hmm. So that like they also were saying that it was very unlikely that she would have intentionally stripped down and like did that, you know?
No.
Which, like you said, for any woman really, it just really seems bizarre to like completely get naked and it just doesn't really add up.
I'm not trying out for Playboy as you jump off a balcony, for goodness sake. So
During the police investigations, they obtained warrants for Rebecca's cell phone records and, of course, took the phone into evidence, which I think is just pretty much standard procedure, just for them to gather as much information as possible about what happened in the hours leading up to this.
Right.
And those records did show that from roughly 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., she was talking and texting with her older sister, Mary. And Mary was confirming that the younger one, Xena, who had gotten on a plane.
Who is not a warrior princess, which is very upsetting.
But Xena had made it home safely. And at about 10:48 p.m., Nina, who is the twin sister of Max's mom, Dina. So try to keep this clear. I'm doing this weird hand motion because I have one side Dina, one side Nina. Dina is Max's mother. Nina is her twin sister.
Can I tell you who Dina and Nina remind me of? Do you watch 90 Day Fiancé?
I don't watch anything.
Okay, you have to watch 90 Day Fiancé, the new whatever, before the 90 days. There is a lady named Darcy and her sister named Stacy, and they both look a little rough, but they apparently looked better a few years ago. That's what they look like. If you like true crime, a lot of time you like trash TV as well. So I think there's somebody that's getting my reference.
Is that a thing? Those two go together?
Yeah, I think, well, I do it, so I assume everyone does. So anyway, if you need a visual, it's Darcy and Stacy are Nina and whatever her name is, Dina. And please stop naming your kids, twin kids, rhyming names. It's terrible for them.
It's like a perpetual like matching outfit for twins,
but
you can't get rid of it.
And if you've named your kids that, I'm sure it's great. I'm sorry.
Okay. So at 10:48, Nina sends Rebecca a text message basically just saying that she wants to stop by the house to speak with Rebecca about Max's accident.
Sure.
This is late at night, okay?
Yeah.
Rebecca did not respond to this message, which personally I wouldn't either because things are very raw and emotional at this time.
Yeah.
And there is absolutely zero chance that I'm going to let this child's aunt come to my house at 11 o'clock at night when I'm sure they all want my head on a stick as it is.
Absolutely.
And so I would just ignore it as well.
Yeah.
So that doesn't really surprise me that she did not answer that message.
No.
But a few hours later at 12:50 in the morning on July 13th, so this is technically the day, she died a few hours after this, there was an indication on the phone records that she checked her voicemail, but the billing records don't show who left that message, which I'm a little confused by. Yeah, because I would think that like all the numbers that are incoming, even if it went to voicemail, you would still know this is the number that called right before.
It would be missed or something, right?
So that doesn't...
Unless you're on the phone, hold on. Unless you're on the phone when you call somebody and it goes right to voicemail, does that still happen? Or is that house phones? We all have call waiting now. Right. Okay, I went back to 1992. Go ahead.
Okay. So the message was deleted by Rebecca herself. So there's only speculation on what that voicemail said that she listened to at 12:50 in the morning.
Right.
So they, the police were not able to hear the message, but I guess for some odd reason they feel like it's true enough to tell the family members that what that message was from Jonah Shacknai telling Rebecca that his son Max was not going to be expected to make it.
Right.
And that his condition had worsened and they were preparing for the worst at this point. Again, there's no proof that that's what the message said. Not a soul has heard that message because Rebecca herself deleted it. So...
Well, this reminds me of another case, which is the Making a Murder Stephen Avery case. Where I
love that case.
Okay, so we're on the same page. Remember when the ex-boyfriend goes into her phone? What's her face's phone? The main girl, Teresa.
Yes,
goes into her phone and listens to and deletes some messages, and so then they're gone and nobody can do anything about it. Telephone companies, cell phone companies do better. Have a backup. Can we do something?
I know, and I mean. Kind of a slippery slope, Melissa.
But if they get a warrant, I want
really want all of my messages and
what kind of messages are you leaving people?
I don't know. We joke all the time, like delete my search history, delete all of my texts. Definitely our, chat on Facebook. You better delete all that before
Messenger.
anybody sees any of
I'll be in prison before the night's over. So Rebecca's autopsy results were pretty perplexing, confusing. They revealed 4 separate instances of head trauma, which investigators expressed various theories over where they came from. The San Diego medical examiner stated, quote, because there was evidence that she went over the balcony in a non-vertical position, she may have struck her head on the balcony on the way down.
That makes zero sense.
No, she was like free falling from this balcony, allegedly. It doesn't make any sense. So forensic consultant and criminal psychologist Maurice Godwin, which if you follow Up and Vanished, true crime podcast, the story of Tara Grinstead, you know Maurice. You know his accent. You know everything about him. You love him. He was like my favorite part of the whole thing. So he was doubtful of the theory, stating that the chances of bumping into the railing, going over the balcony, and hitting your head 4 times is highly unlikely.
Which it is.
Duh. Yeah, I would have liked to get that consultant money just to tell them that. So Rebecca's family was also suspicious of the fact that her hands and feet were bound. Again, duh.
Right.
Her hands were tied behind her back in a very specific type of nautical knot, as well as all of the knots being tied on the rope being very complex knots. And again, our boy Adam, not our boy, can't stand this dude.
No.
He was a boop. I might edit that out. He was a tugboat captain. So these, if you watch, we'll post on our under this sort of the video links, but you have to see this reenactment of these knots. These are not like basic Boy Scout knots either, right? They're like.
Let me tell you, the most complicated knot I can do is a double knot on a shoelace. Okay, like, I cannot.
I was gonna say that
There's
too.
no way. If someone even told me to like tie up a boat, I mean, they would not want me to do it because it would float away from the dock. Okay, I cannot tie those types of knots.
I'd be like, can I just hold it? I could hold it better than this. Yeah, so it's the most complicated knot. So basically, she would have to do this elaborate knot, butt naked, around her arms.
In the front.
In the front.
She would have to do it in front first.
And then slip an arm out, crawl over it, step over it, naked again.
Right.
And then move her other hand in there.
Oh, but she would have to do it. I
After
don't know
her
how.
legs are tied.
After her legs are already tied, so she would have to do like
What kind of balance do you have?
Right. No, it just there's literally no possible way. Well, I guess it's possible because the police did determine that it was quote unquote possible.
There she goes with those air fingers
But
again.
just because something is possible doesn't mean that's the truth of the
Right.
matter. It just means like, okay, we tried this out and yeah, it's possible, but
Yeah.
it's still highly unlikely.
Yeah. So Mandy's very not with that.
I'm
But
not
yeah,
with
so if you watch, first of all, watch the video, because all I could think is if somebody asked me, hey, Melissa, why don't you tie all these knots? We're going to videotape you doing all these things and just stand here for a minute. Tell them no, don't do that. Have somebody else do it. You're being conned and you're next to die. Don't do this.
So there was also a small amount of blood found on Rebecca's legs, and the forensic pathologist said that it was either menstrual blood or bleeding from like an intrauterine device. But he didn't offer any explanation for that tape residue that I mentioned.
Right.
So about the blood from the legs, you know, I kind of said I thought that was a little odd to Melissa earlier today, and she kind of pointed out that, you know, maybe if she was having that time of the month, that wouldn't be that unusual.
Yeah. Well, and also, yeah, like we were talking about, they talk about when somebody's died that their bodily functions kind of
happen.
Just happen.
Right.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be so unusual that to me, that.
But again,
that would
if
be
she
perfect.
was on her monthly cycle, it
We're being
seems
delicate.
very odd that she would strip down naked, have absolutely no like
protection, for lack of a better word.
right, and then do this. I don't know. I'm just
We are
really-
not team suicide.
I'm
at
not
all.
team
This-
suicide. If that's not clear by now,
Yeah,
I'm not.
We're
I
not
don't
buying
believe it.
this. Mm-mm.
So on September 7th, the private forensic consultant, Maurice Godwin, told a reporter that Rebecca's suicide was staged and that, in his opinion, someone had dazed her, essentially, with some blows to the back of the head and then tossed her over the balcony.
Right.
So this is the theory that I personally subscribe
Yeah.
to. It makes the most sense to me.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how her death can be ruled a suicide given these other strange things that just
Don't add up.
Right. And you can't simply write off things like 4, blows to the head
Yeah.
as irrelevant, because obviously they're relevant. Something happened to her and it wasn't just that she hit her head on,
Yeah,
on the way down.
down.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So her body was actually, her family had her body exhumed and a second autopsy performed. And the results of that were that it was unlikely that she died from hanging.
What?
So this is really interesting because the whole time I was already thinking this. I was already thinking, oh my gosh, Adam just says that he cut her down before the police arrived. And to me, it was already a little bit weird that we're just taking Adam's, I said, who's the only person there. And, you're taking his story as the truth.
Right.
And so whenever I read that the second autopsy result, and this was, of course, done from a private
An
independent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not from the state or, the police didn't assign this. So they said that it was unlikely that she died from hanging because her neck was not fractured in any way. And I'm not an expert on what bones look like in certain types of deaths, but
okay.
it would make sense to me that there would be some, classic things that you would see with different manners of death that you would see across the board and be like, yep, that's definitely a sign of that, So there was nothing like that. The attorney, Keith Greer, told reporters that the type of injury was actually more consistent with a strangling type of death. Mm-hmm. So this is where, to me, I just feel like the evidence is stacking up and the fingers are being pointed directly and squarely on Adam Shacknai, because now we have this rope, which I also read that was actually a special type of rope that was really used for water sports, like what you would attach a tube to a back of a boat with to do tubing or whatever. So
hey, Anthony Curcio could have been a part of this.
So, it does seem a little bit odd that type of rope was used, and just so happens there's a tugboat captain around.
If you look at any of the pictures, not like the death pictures because I can never handle that, but they showed like pictures of the rope and stuff. It's a serious rope. And if she is so overwhelmed, like the idea that Jonah's family's kind of putting out there is that she became so overwhelmed with what she had allegedly done to this poor little boy that she decides to kill herself. Basically, within an hour, I think is what they thought. Within an hour or an hour and a half, they assume that's when she actually died. So they're saying that she came up with this plan, executed it, has no background in, I think her sister said they might not have even really went swimming when they were little, like no water sports, water, whatever. She's not a tugboat captain for sure. And I would like to know if they checked her Google, because that would be the thing I always do. I Google everything.
They did.
Oh,
they
look at
found,
that, Mandy.
They did. They searched. I was going to talk about that later. They did search the computer inside, the computers that were inside of the mansion, and there was no search result with hits for anything like hanging or how to tie knots or any of those number of things. Like they, of course, looked for certain key terms, and there was absolutely zero searches that would be related to her looking up information on how to do this.
Right.
So basically, we're supposed to believe, like you said, that she just came up with this idea and set it all up and just did it in a matter of an hour or two. Because they did say that they believe that her time of death was sometime between 1 and 3 in the morning.
Right.
So she just listened to that voicemail at 12:50 a.m.,
gets so upset,
right,
and makes this plan
and just does it. And if you see like the diagrams of how this was, or even the reenactments that we watched, you would see that it was really quite elaborate. I mean, the way that they had the rope tied around the bed and like just all these different things, it would have easily taken her a good amount of time, right, to even set this up. Mm-hmm. And then, I don't think there was no evidence that she was suicidal or depressed or had ever experienced anything like that in her history. So it's hard for me to make, it's hard for me to go from, oh, she, got really grief stricken and killed her, and just did that. I don't think so.
Well, another thing that was mentioned is typically when somebody hangs themselves, they do it from something above them. And this is a huge house. Obviously, there was a huge chandelier. I'm sure the ceilings are high. There's more options there than most houses, I guess. So to throw yourself off a balcony isn't really typical at all of what somebody would do. I mean, I don't understand how you get to like be like, oh, you know what? This is what I'm going to do. That doesn't make any sense. That's bonkers.
Like you said, it's too elaborate, like you said. I mean, and really, I don't have the exact statistics, but I've read before and, looked up information before on the different ways, basically, there are statistics, and women typically do not commit suicide in a violent fashion like that. Right. It's usually more along the lines of like overdosing right. or something less painful, really. You know, women are not, I don't want to say that they're too chicken to do that, but basically that's what the like studies have shown, that women just don't really have that. They're not able to do that, you know?
Well, I think that, and I've read that women typically don't want somebody to find them in these, not necessarily nude.
They still consider
what's going to happen when somebody comes to find me, whereas some men might not do the same thing, but women are thinking somebody's going to come in here, and I don't want to make it terrible for them too.
Right. So there was actually some more evidence that was found at the scene that is not really talked about as much in this case. I had to do a little deep digging to find this because it's kind of very much been pushed under the rug, in my opinion. But they found blood and a clump of hair in the bathroom and a latex glove that had mixed DNA in the room. They also found a pair of women's underwear and some more clumps of hair in the guest house where Adam was staying. So
not our boy Adam.
Right. And Adam and Rebecca were the only two on the mansion property.
On campus?
There were only two on campus. Like, yeah. So I guess what that would mean is that at some point she either went over to the guest house willingly or not willingly.
So willingly, yeah.
But there was, like I said, underwear and more hair. It didn't say it was her hair. I'm assuming it was, otherwise what I read, they wouldn't have mentioned it.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing is that they did not find Rebecca's DNA on the balcony that she supposedly jumped from.
Right.
So
check out these pictures, because they kept pointing to like these dusted prints and like how dirty. I never saw a clear picture of what they were seeing. They're like, and then there's a footprint here and this.
I know. Like, I'm like, where?
Maybe my life is just so dusty and dirty that everything looks normal to me, but I couldn't see anything.
Right. So there was another interesting thing that Melissa doesn't want to talk about, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think it's very relevant.
You can talk about it. Bring it.
Adam Shacknai actually told detectives initially that he had spent the morning before he found Rebecca hanging, allegedly, looking at some bondage type pornographic material on his cell phone. So what are the odds of that? That he admits that he's watching this like bondage porn, and then wow, she's found bound and gagged and supposedly hung. Like, that's a little bit too much of a coincidence for me.
Well, you know what I was just thinking about? So this is West Coast, right? And he's coming from Memphis, Tennessee. He finds her at 6:48 in the morning. What is that in Tennessee? Like 3:48?
Yeah, why is he awake?
Why would he, like, his body would not be acclimated to this? So it's really strange to me that he's just like, oh, I should get my morning coffee and
just go strolling around. Yeah. Right. I always thought the time that he found her was really, really weird too.
Yeah. And we didn't mention that after he gets off the phone with 911 and has like a spat with the 911 operator, he texts Jonah to say...
by the way, your girlfriend committed suicide.
Sorry, a lot going on, but your girlfriend killed herself. What? That doesn't make sense. I know we've gotten into like a culture of texting, but I feel like finding a dead body is worth a call.
At their home.
Yeah, at their home.
But this isn't just like, oh, this happened, down the street. This is at your house, and I'm going to text you and say...
We know he can use a phone. He just called 911.
Right.
He doesn't do great.
And he knows that his brother is at the bedside of his son, who is, critically injured and, is possibly not going to make it, has not died yet at this point.
Right.
But it just seems odd to send a text message.
Or like a text like, call me when you have a chance. Something like
I need you to step out and...
That's information you want delivered, at least with a human voice on the other end. One thing I found kind of interesting is Jonathan's... what he said to the press or whatever, his comments were about about Max and Rebecca. He said, quote, Max was an extraordinarily loving, happy, talented, and special little boy. He brought joy to everyone who knew him, and we will miss him desperately. Now, Rebecca, who he's been in love with for 2 years, he says, Rebecca, too, was a wonderful and unique person who will always have a special place in my heart. What? I mean, I just feel like there's no, like, emotion. I feel like he's done with her. Like... Does that sound like somebody you love?
I mean, it's just hard to say because at this point, like, they don't really know the full details of what happened to Max. And then, of course, I think it would be hard as a parent to not hold the adult in charge responsible if your child is critically injured, you know, under their care.
Right. Yeah.
And especially because then you had the one guy coming out and saying that they thought he was potentially suffocated before. Yeah. And so it's like, well, what's going on here? Like, what did, you know, did you do something to my son before, you know?
Yeah.
So it's almost one of these bizarre, like, you know, was Max's death like intentional and then staged to look like something else? And then now we have this happen with Rebecca and like, it looks like it could be staged to be something, other than what's being reported. And so it really is a very, very bizarre case with a lot of twists and turns. And, you know, you could go, like I said, down the rabbit hole. There's a ton of Reddit threads. All the web sleuths are all on top of this case.
Yeah.
And,
we found a new one today with like 4,000 links, and I was stressed how we were going to get through them.
And I sent it to her this afternoon, and I was like, I found this is a new thing we haven't looked at yet. I just had to close my browser and say, I have enough information. Yeah. I cannot even take any more in.
So one thing we didn't talk about is after all this happened, Adam actually was given a polygraph test. And I'm used to polygraph tests from like Maury, where you just see somebody and they like ask a question and they give a thumbs up or thumbs down, but they're not interactive with the person at all, right? So he was not the baby's daddy. But so anyway, so during this, I had to look again to see, is this actually the polygraph test? Because the guy's literally giving the exam, but before this, he's talking to him like, man, what do you think happened? Do you think she committed suicide? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. When I saw it, I thought suicide. And I'm thinking, aren't these kind of leading questions? Or like, what business is it of yours? Just pull up your machine, hook things up, and
I thought they were supposed to be yes or no.
Right.
Like, if you start talking and telling a story, of course, like,
it was
you're
like
not
the
gonna...
conversation before. So it's not actually the the questions, but they had to have edited it, but you know, you normally hear like a baseline question. Is your name Adam? Yes, no. So they asked him some questions, and he said to Adam at the end, he said, well, it's not great, and it's not the worst. It's inconclusive, so we don't really know. And you know, to me, like, okay, well, I know polygraphs aren't 100%, but like, let's look a little bit more at Tug Boat Captain over here, because what is he doing? Like, why? What does he have to lie about?
Right.
Really? I mean,
and there has to be some statistic out there too about there's a statistic for everything.
Yeah.
But there has to be some legitimate statistic and study done on like the percentage of times that the person who finds the body and calls it in is actually the one who's responsible.
It's like an arsonist going back to a fire.
Right. Like, so to me, you know, Adam, there's pretty incriminating evidence against him, if you ask me.
Please never contact us. Please don't tell him we talked about him. Nothing like that.
Right. But because there was another actually interesting thing that from those reenactments that we had discussed that they had done to determine basically if certain things were possible to actually have happened.
Right.
If the death happened the way that they're saying it did, that she jumped off the balcony on her own accord. But as I mentioned before, the rope was anchored to a bed in the room. And it was a decent sized bed. It was either a full or a queen. And in the actual crime scene, if you will. The scene. I don't know how to describe it.
You got it.
The actual crime scene. The bed was only moved maybe a few inches. And so they could tell that because, you know, whenever you have a bed on carpet, that there'll be like an indentation, you know, on the floor where the four posts were. And so they could tell that the bed had been moved slightly, which of course isn't really that surprising. That's what you would expect if the weight of a body was, you know,
attached to it and thrown off.
Exactly. So they did when they did the reenactment, they used a weighted bag, like a punching bag or a boxing bag or whatever you want to call it. A punching bag.
We don't know. Sure, I'll go punching.
And they had it set, of course, to the same weight roughly as Rebecca.
Right.
And they tied the rope around a bed, set the scene, just like they were reenacting it, and threw this bag off the balcony from varying heights. They had done it where it was like, oh, if she had just like stepped over, or if someone had actually thrown her over. They tried it several different ways.
Yeah.
Well, each and every single time that they did this, the bed that the rope was attached to actually jerked more like several feet.
Right.
So it is a little strange that in the real case, the bed was only moved a few inches. So, like I said, I feel like everything is kind of pointing to the fact that this was not a suicide. And of course her family insists that she never would kill herself, which everybody's family will.
They always, if it's
maybe not
questionable,
always, right?
But typically.
Right. I mean, but at least if there's ever any signs of anything like that, you would, you usually will hear the parents say, oh, well, when she was a teenager, she suffered with, this, that, and the other. But there was nothing like that. They were very insistent that she would have never done that. She had actually spoken to family members and made, plans for not too far in the future, but like for the following coming weeks. And, basically carried on as if she wasn't planning on ending her life at that point. So, like I said, I don't know about Adam.
Well, another thing, food for thought, his DNA was nowhere on the rope that he supposedly cut her down from. So if he's cutting her down from the rope, there's going to be something there. But if you're using gloves to kind of set this whole scene, you might not remember, take the gloves off, take the knife, cut it. So how do you cut somebody off and your DNA is not nowhere around?
Right. And honestly, even if he didn't use, like, you would think that if he was really trying to stage this whole thing, saying that he cut her down would be the perfect excuse to have his DNA on her body. So that way, actually, you would have your tracks, I feel like, even more covered, just in case you did mess up somewhere. You would say,
try to kill somebody. Here you go, Mandy.
Right. I know. I get myself into a lot of trouble with these types of conversations. But yeah, there was none of that. And so basically, though, the whole place, aside from those few pieces of evidence that I mentioned a little bit ago, pretty much the whole crime scene, though, was free of a lot of DNA.
Yeah.
So that, to me, says that somebody took a lot of care in doing this and, maybe did a quick sweep of the place and tried to, get rid of any evidence. And, something like this, especially with the blows to the back of the head, it would be a quick thing. It doesn't necessarily mean there was a struggle that you would see a lot of different things. There was a chair, I think, overturned in the bedroom, which, some argue that is a sign of a struggle. Although one tipped over chair.
Look at my house.
Yeah. Seriously, I can't
Chairs
say.
Around the ceiling.
Right.
Well, yeah. And if she's like going to kill herself, does she really care if she leaves the room in disarray? It's whatever, that doesn't really make any sense to me. But also, I don't think we talked about this. Dina's sister, Nina, apparently showed up to the house that night, knocked on the door, nobody answered, she left. So as this kind of goes forward, the family of Rebecca decides to file a wrongful death suit and names Dina, Nina, and Adam as the defendants, I guess.
Right.
How does that work?
Right.
And suing them for several $1 million.
I think 10.
10, yeah. I mean, any $1 million is a lot of $1 million. But so they were all on the family's radar. They were all people who benefited in a way, I guess, from Rebecca's death. I'm not entirely sure the husband, please don't tell anybody, tell him I told you this, but I'm not entirely sure the husband wasn't so upset he asked for help, or I don't know. I don't know what I think. I never know what I think.
I'll tell you what I think. I think it's very clear right now that I think Adam murdered her.
Yeah. Allegedly.
I just think the evidence points to that strongly. I don't see how the evidence that they have has been basically written off as irrelevant. I think it's all worth looking into.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense why you would just say that none of these things are important to take note of when clearly they are. Now, tinfoil hat time. As we said, Jonah is a very, very rich man. So you never really want to think of like things being bought with money, but it happens, folks. all the time.
Yeah,
I
it
wouldn't know. I don't have enough money to bribe anyone into anything. But when you're talking $17 million income in 1 year, you're kind of in the ballpark where you might be able to pay some people to kind of turn their backs on certain things.
Yeah. I did read when he was doing renovations on his house earlier a few years before, maybe, he was donating to a lot of campaigns to get special permits and stuff for his house. Don't know if that's true. Allegedly. So, money equals power, unfortunately. So, I don't know. I think it doesn't make sense to just say we're done looking here. There's too many things that don't add up.
Right. So I think that I don't think Rebecca was ever hanging off the balcony. I think that the evidence doesn't point to that at all. I think that was a complete setup. And like I said, the only person who supposedly saw her hanging was Adam himself, who then cut her down. So when the paramedics got there, she was already on the ground.
Right.
And then especially with the second autopsy revealing that her injuries really weren't even consistent with a hanging death, I think that pretty much sealed the deal for me, that the whole hanging was fake and she never was hanging at all. And that would explain why the bed wasn't moved a lot and why her DNA wasn't found on the balcony. And it kind of explains several things that are, questionable about the evidence of this case.
I also saw pictures, not of her, but kind of a recreation, but showing where the blood actually pooled into her legs. Not pulled, but pooled. So if you're hanging upside down, right, your feet are hanging, blood's rushing to your head. So for you to have, when you're found dead, and to be black and blue really from all the blood pooling, hopefully my southern accent's not coming out too much, but that doesn't add up.
Right.
It would be the opposite.
Right. I don't know, Melissa. We
have no idea.
No, we have no clue. We're so professional here.
We have to solve one crime. I'm very disappointed in us.
We just don't have time for solving them.
Yeah.
We just talk about them. So, I did basically say what my theory was, and it's kind of that's pretty much is the one it's one of the ones I had read on Reddit and on these different sites. You
can't cite Reddit as a credible source.
You can't. If you're talking about theories, you can.
Yeah.
These people know what they're talking about when they're talking about theories.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I think the type of knots that were used, the fact that she was tied behind her back, really the whole manner of death, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't believe for 1 second she killed herself. I think that she was murdered. I do have questions about why or who was involved.
Yeah.
Or, any of that. But I guess we'll never know. And the case is pretty much closed now because they've ruled that it was a suicide. And,
Well, the family's case, like I said, it went from Nina, Dina, Hickory and Doc, and Adam to being just Adam. So in April of this year, the family dropped Nina and Dina. Oh, I'm so sick of saying that. From the lawsuit. So they said that, I guess, cell phone pings showed that the sister was at a different house during the time this would have happened, and that the mom, Nina,
she was at the hospital.
Yeah.
Right.
So so they weren't actively involved, but that doesn't account for Adam.
Yep. And like I said, he was the only one there. So
yeah. So I think those are our theories. We'd love to hear your theories.
Yeah, if anybody has any insight or thinks of anything that could have possibly happened, we'd love to hear it.
Yep. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we actually have a few promos for you guys to listen to. I hope you've been enjoying the promos we've had. There are a lot of great people we found in the podcast world, and we're interested. We'd love for you to hear some new shows. That's how I always find out about shows on podcasts, through other podcasts talking about them. It's a giant circle. So hope you have a good week. Hope Mandy feels better.
Yes, I hope for everyone's sake that I have my normal voice back
next
time.
Have a good night. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hello.
Hi.
This is Georgia and Kate from Nothing Rhymes with Murder. Join us on a global journey of murder.
Yes, every week we go to a new country and find a true crime gem, as well as some fun hotspots to visit.
So remember, kids, life is a journey.
Don't let murder stop you.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye then. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, true crime fans, have you listened to Wine and Crime yet?
We're a true crime comedy podcast hosted by 3 childhood friends who chug wine, chat true crime, and unleash our worst Minnesotan accents.
Each week, us gals pick a true crime topic and pair it with a delicious wine before delving into the background and psychology behind the crime.
Then we share and speculate wildly about a couple of bonkers cases related to the topic.
Past episodes include necrophilia, cults, crimes of passion, cruise ship disappearances, exorcisms gone wrong, all this over a bottle of wine, or, let's be real, 3.
Listen anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Wine and Crime Pod, and check out our website and blog at wineandcrimepodcast.com.
Cheers!
Thanks so much for listening to the Moms and Murder podcast. Make sure to check back with us next week for a new episode. You can also find us at momsandmurder.com, where you can connect with us via social media. Please make sure you subscribe and give us 5 stars, because giving us 4 stars would be a crime. Thanks so much.